She wore the veil I bought, and married the man I gave half my life to. My daughter. My husband. And me? I walked her down the aisle, straight to the altar where no one waited. You know how they say a mother lives for her child? That she'd do anything, give up her dreams, her time, her youth, for the chance to watch that child become everything she couldn't? Well, I did. I gave her everything. My time. My body. My marriage. Even the pieces of myself I swore I'd keep sacred. I raised her alone for most of her life. I fought for her, fed her, stayed up nights by her bedside when the fever wouldn't break. I shielded her from pain, even when I was drowning in it. And when I married a man who promised to love us both, I believed we were finally safe. But I didn't see what was happening. Not really. Not when she started staying up late just to talk to him. Not when she laughed a little too loudly at his jokes. Not when I walked in on the two of them sitting a little too close on the couch, her in my robe, him with that same lazy smile he once used on me. I told myself it was in my head. I told myself I was just tired. I told myself a lot of things. But that morning, her wedding day, the silence in the church was louder than any betrayal I'd ever imagined. Rows of chairs filled with faces pretending not to know. My heels clicking on the marble floor. Her hand on my arm. And his name, printed in gold on the invitation I paid for. She smiled. And I walked her forward, step by step. My daughter. My husband. My shame. Only to stop, right where he should have been. An altar. A veil. A mother with nothing left to lose. A lipstick-stained shirt tucked in a drawer. The crumpled wedding invite in the trash. The family photo with a rip down the middle. Her smirk. His ring. My silence. And if you think that's the end of the story, you don't know how far a woman can go when everything she ever loved is stolen. By her own blood. Before everything shattered, I was a woman most people would call dependable. The kind who shows up early, stays late, brings cookies to PTA meetings, and writes thank you notes in cursive. I was a schoolteacher in a quiet town outside Ohio, 5th grade mostly. The kind of place where you know the kids, and the kids know who bakes the banana bread for Teacher Appreciation Day. My name rarely made headlines. I wasn't extraordinary, but I loved hard and I gave deeply. That was my pride. I met my husband, Daniel, at a college volunteer event. He was studying architecture, I was studying education. We were both broke, both idealistic, both convinced we could build something beautiful out of nothing but ambition and ramen noodles. And we did for a while. We got married in a backyard ceremony, no photographer. Just mason jars, borrowed chairs, and my best friend playing a guitar with a cracked neck. When I found out I was pregnant the following year, I remember crying in the back room of the school library, not out of fear, but because I'd never felt so full. I named her Lily, my sunshine, my reason. Daniel said she had my eyes, but her fire? That was all her. She grew up surrounded by stories and scraped knees. We baked together every Saturday. Vanilla and cinnamon on her nose, flour on the floor. Our laughter echoing through a house that barely held its furniture but overflowed with joy. When she turned 16, we got matching tattoos, tiny forget-me-nots on our wrists. Mine for my mother who had passed, hers for moments we never want to forget. We wore them proudly, a private promise between us. No matter where life took us, we'd never lose each other. We had our little rituals. She called me every day after school, even when she didn't need to. We held hands in church tight like secrets lived in our palms. We had Friday movie nights, just the two of us, wrapped in the same blanket we'd had since she was 6. It sounds too perfect now, doesn't it? But love, real love, blinds you. And when you're looking through the lens of devotion, you don't always notice when something begins to rot. Daniel changed first. He stopped coming to bed on time. He started taking long calls in the garage. He smiled less, laughed rarely, and when he looked at me, it was like I was furniture, familiar, functional, easy to forget. At first, I thought it was stress, work, aging, something he'd grow out of. We all slowed down eventually, but there was something else, something in the way his eyes lingered, just a second too long, when Lily would walk into the room. At 17, Lily was striking, tall, confident, with the kind of presence that made people stare without meaning to. She knew it too, knew the power she had. And sometimes she'd wield it like a weapon, testing boundaries, watching reactions. She had charm that came too easy, and a silence that could cut deeper than most people's words. I remember one night, I came home late from grading papers. The lights were dim. Music played low in the background, our wedding song. I walked in, expecting to see Daniel waiting with wine or maybe a silly surprise. Instead, I saw the two of them on the couch. Too close. Too comfortable. Too familiar. Lily was laughing, her hand resting on his knee, lightly, carelessly, like it had always belonged there. Daniel looked up at me, startled, and stood too quickly. They said it was nothing. Just a joke. A misunderstanding. And I believed them. I wanted to believe them. Because what kind of mother, what kind of wife lets a thought like that take root? So I swallowed it. Pushed it down. Told myself they loved me too much to do anything unforgivable. But that night, when I lay in bed beside a man who barely touched me anymore, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, was slowly moving me out of my own life. And I didn't know then, but I was already halfway gone. It started small. Almost imperceptible. Lily stopped calling me mom. At first, I thought she was trying to be grown, testing boundaries, finding her voice. She began referring to me by my first name, like she was my equal. Like we were two women competing for space in the same mirror. She stopped sitting at the table with me for breakfast. No more warm coffee, no casual chatter. Just a cold morning. And the shuffle of slippers disappearing down the hallway. At first, I tried to chalk it up to teenage mood swings. Hormones. The usual tug-of-war between mother and daughter. But then came the missed curfews. The locked bedroom door. The phone always face down. Always vibrating with messages she never explained. She didn't need me anymore. And somehow she made sure I felt it. Daniel wasn't much better. He started working late. Meetings ran over, he'd say. Too much traffic, grabbing drinks with the guys. Except we lived in a quiet town where nothing ever ran late. And the men he claimed to be meeting didn't even drink. He stopped noticing me. I wore a new dress one evening, something soft and lavender, the color he once said made my eyes look brighter, and he didn't even look up from his plate. Even his affection faded. No more goodnight kisses. No more arms around my waist while I did dishes. Just silence and the soft click of the garage door as he left again for errands. I remember the night everything cracked. I was doing laundry. His, hers, mine, all still tangled together like some sad metaphor. I picked up his jeans and felt something in the pocket. A folded receipt. A hotel bar 30 minutes outside town. 2 glasses of wine. 1 chocolate lava cake. It wasn't the cake that hurt. It was the date. Lily's birthday. He told me he had a client meeting that night. Told me he was sorry he missed dinner. I didn't say anything right away. I needed proof. Solid ground beneath me before the world collapsed completely. So I waited. And then one night when he forgot his phone on the nightstand during a shower, I picked it up. Not because I wanted to catch him, but because I already had. The screen lit up. Can't wait to see you tonight. The message was unsigned. No name. Just a heart. I froze. My hands shook. I scrolled up. The earlier messages were deleted. Just that one sentence. But it was enough. Enough to know I wasn't imagining it. Enough to know I wasn't crazy. I put the phone back down exactly as I'd found it. Walked into the bathroom. Looked at my husband, my partner, my supposed best friend, washing his face in the mirror like everything was fine. I asked him who she was. He paused. Laughed. Said it was probably spam. Said I watched too many movies. And just like that he made me feel small. Silly. Paranoid. And worse, I let him. I began to question myself. I stared at the ceiling at night wondering what had changed. I replayed our memories like old home videos, searching for clues. Was it the weight I'd gained? The years I'd given up working double shifts, so he could build his business? Was it me? Had I become forgettable? Still deep inside, something itched. Something didn't sit right. But the most painful part wasn't Daniel. It was Lily. She no longer came home for dinner. No longer sat with me for movies or walks or heart-to-hearts. She barely looked me in the eye anymore. And when she did, her gaze was cold, measured. One night, I tried to reach her. I knocked on her door. Gently. Like I used to. She opened it, arms crossed, face blank. I said, I miss you. She stared at me for a long time, then whispered, maybe you should stop trying so hard, and closed the door in my face. If this part broke your heart like it broke mine, hit that like button so I know I'm not alone. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Let's talk about it. The days after that blurred. I started tracking patterns: who left the house when, what time the garage door opened, how long Lily was gone, and whether Daniel's car was still in the driveway. I even drove past that hotel bar once, sat across the street with my engine running, watched couples walk in, some laughing, some holding hands, some wearing that nervous look of new secrets. But I never saw his face, never saw hers, and yet somehow I knew. It was like my own child had vanished and been replaced with someone who wore her smile, her perfume, even her handwriting, but lacked her heart. And Daniel? He had stopped being my husband long before I saw it. I was losing them both. No, they were already gone. All that was left was the truth, and the wreckage it would bring. There's a certain kind of silence that falls over you when you realize you don't know the people you've built your life around. It doesn't arrive like thunder. It creeps in, quiet, steady, suffocating. And when I could no longer trust my own senses, I did something I never imagined I would do. I hired someone to find the truth I was too afraid to face. His name was Mr. Carlson, private investigator, recommended by a friend of a friend. He had a quiet demeanor, weathered eyes, and a no-nonsense approach that made me feel both reassured and terrified. I gave him 2 names: my husband, my daughter. He didn't flinch, just nodded, scribbled in his notebook, and said, "You'll hear from me by the end of the week." That week stretched longer than any I had lived. I still went to work, still showed up at the school like I wasn't unraveling inside. I still greeted students with smiles, still said good morning to strangers, still packed Lily's lunch, though she rarely touched it anymore. But every hour, every passing moment, I waited. My phone became an anchor. My heart lodged in my throat. And then the envelope came. No return address, just my name typed neatly, tucked inside the mailbox like any other letter. I opened it in the kitchen. Alone. The dog asleep on the floor. The kettle hissing quietly in the background. Inside were photographs. Still. Sharp. Undeniable. One showed Daniel standing by his car, his hand resting on someone's hip. Another, taken from across a parking lot, caught them walking into a hotel side by side. A third, the one that broke me, was taken through a restaurant window. He was leaning in, kissing her. And her face, her unmistakable face, was Lily's. My daughter. My flesh. My only child. And the man I had once trusted with my life was kissing her like she was his first love. I dropped the photos. The floor seemed to shift beneath me. The room shrank. The sound of the kettle grew louder, more violent, like it too was screaming. I remember grabbing the counter to keep from falling. My knees buckled. My breath came in short, broken waves. Felt like drowning while standing. I kept whispering, "No, no, no." But there it was. Proof. Cold and colorless and utterly devastating. 1,000 memories came flooding in. Lily at 4, clinging to Daniel's leg at the park. Her teenage tantrums whenever he left for work trips. The way she started wearing my perfume. The time she snapped at me for talking to him too much at dinner. All those moments I brushed off. Explained away. Laughed about. They weren't innocent. They weren't nothing. They were the trail I'd missed, leading straight into the heart of the fire. Wait, did you see that coming? If your jaw dropped like mine did, tap the subscribe button right now, because what happens next will leave you speechless. I didn't confront them immediately. I couldn't. I was too broken, too stunned. Instead, I withdrew like a wounded animal, licking invisible wounds in silence. I stopped cooking. I stopped asking where they were going. I stopped pretending. I became a ghost in my own home, and still neither of them noticed. Or maybe they did and just didn't care. There were nights I'd lie awake and hear the floor creak as Lily walked down the hallway, toward his office, and never returned to her room. I closed my eyes, clutched the pillow, and prayed that what I knew wasn't real. That maybe somehow I had misread the entire world. But the photographs never lied. Neither did her smirk the next morning when she'd stroll into the kitchen, still wearing his old t-shirt. I looked at her then, not as my daughter but as a stranger. A stranger who had worn my love like a costume, who had studied my trust, only to rip it from me with steady hands. And Daniel, he didn't even try to hide it anymore. He'd kiss me on the cheek before leaving for work, as if routine could rewrite reality, as if the ashes in my chest could still pass for a beating heart. But what he didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that I wasn't done. I wasn't finished hurting, yes, but I also wasn't finished standing. Because when a woman has been hollowed out, what's left is space. Space for rage. Space for clarity. Space for something colder than revenge. And I had just begun to fill that space. There comes a moment when silence becomes unbearable. When the truth claws at your throat, demanding to be released. Mine came on a Sunday afternoon right after church, when the house still smelled like lemon polish and pot roast, and Lily was humming in the bathroom. Daniel was in his study. I walked in holding the photos.
No yelling. No screaming.
Just a quiet question. How long? He didn't even look surprised. He closed his laptop slowly, folded his hands and said, "What are you talking about?" I laid the photographs on the desk between us. The ones of him and Lily outside the hotel. The kiss. The touch. The betrayal. He looked down, then up. Then had the audacity to laugh. "You're being dramatic," he said. "She needed comfort. She's been going through a lot. You're reading into things." My ears rang. I stared at the man I had once kissed beneath autumn leaves and fairy lights. The man who once carried me over the threshold of our first apartment. And he was telling me with a straight face that I was crazy. That I'd imagined it all. That my daughter, the same one who used to braid my hair on lazy Sundays, needed comfort. And somehow that made it okay? I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I wanted to throw something, but I didn't. I wanted to run, but I couldn't. Instead I said one sentence. "You make me sick." He leaned back, smiled slightly, like he'd won something I didn't know I was competing for. Later that evening I tried talking to Lily. I called her into the kitchen, set the photographs down, looked her in the eye. She glanced at them, barely flinched, and crossed her arms. "You're being unfair," she said coldly. "He understands me in ways you never did." I blinked. "You're my daughter," I whispered. "You're my mother, not my jailer," she shot back. I don't remember what I said after that, or if I said anything at all, because in that moment, I realized I had already lost her. But what I didn't realize was how quickly she'd twist the knife. Within days, word began to spread. Not about the affair. Not about the betrayal. No. About me. Lily told her friends I'd always been controlling. That I couldn't handle letting go. That I was obsessed with keeping her away from Daniel out of some twisted jealousy. She told my sister I was paranoid. That I was seeing things. That she was worried about me. That I was mentally unstable. She told our church group that I was bitter, because she was growing up, and I couldn't accept it. And Daniel, he didn't say a word. But his silence was louder than any accusation. The town whispered. At the grocery store, people who used to stop and chat now just nodded politely and moved on. At church, the hugs got shorter. The eyes avoided mine. Even my best friend Kelly, who once cried with me over miscarriages and bad bosses, asked, "Are you sure you're not just imagining things?" I was being erased, gaslighted out of my own life. And then came the papers, folded neatly in an envelope with a smirk of a return address. Daniel Harper versus my name. Petition for divorce. Irreconcilable differences. He didn't even bother to hide it anymore. He wanted the house. Said I was emotionally unfit. Wanted alimony, citing mental instability. And Lily? She gave a statement. In court. For him. Said I was erratic. That I had episodes. That I made her feel unsafe. I sat there in a courtroom beneath artificial lights, while my daughter, my baby girl, lied under oath to protect the man who used to be her stepfather. And now, what even was he? And all I could do was sit and listen as everything I built burned down around me. The house? His. The savings? Frozen. The friends? Gone. My daughter? Unrecognizable. I went home that night, not to our house but to a motel room off the highway. The kind with flickering lights and thin towels. I lay on the stiff bed, staring at the ceiling. And that's when something inside me hardened. Because grief can break you. But betrayal? Betrayal builds you back differently. Not softer. Not sweeter. Not weaker. Builds you sharper. And somewhere between the motel pillow and the sound of traffic outside my window, I made a quiet promise to myself. They had taken everything, but I still had something they didn't know I had. Time, patience, and the will to outlast them both. Before the motel, before the courtroom, before the betrayal stained everything I thought I knew, there was love. There was once a day so perfect, so full of light, that even now I can't speak of it without a lump forming in my throat. It was my wedding day. Daniel stood at the end of a makeshift aisle we'd carved out in my aunt's backyard. Folding chairs. Lanterns borrowed from neighbors. A white sheet pinned to an old oak tree. The whole thing cost less than a weekend trip, but it felt like a fairy tale. And Lily, just 5 years old, was the flower girl. She wore a yellow dress I stitched myself. Every petal she tossed from her little bee. We danced that night under string lights. Daniel spent hours hanging. Lily kept interrupting our first dance, insisting on being held, twirling in and out, her laughter wrapping around us like a ribbon. At one point Daniel picked her up and said, "This is the only girl I'll ever need after your mother." At the time I thought it was sweet. Now those words sit differently. Heavy. Twisted. But not every memory was sweet. I remember the first time Lily looked me in the eye and said, "I hate you." She was 13. I had just told her she couldn't go to a sleepover with kids I didn't know. She screamed. Slammed her bedroom door. Said I was ruining her life. Cut me, yes, but not because I believed her. Cut because I knew she meant it. At least in that moment. And I still tucked her in that night. I still stood outside her door, listening to her cry, arms aching to hold her, but knowing she wouldn't let me. Because that's what mothers do. We wait outside closed doors, hoping one day they open again. Some never do. And then there was the baby. 15 years ago, when Lily was just 6, I found out I was pregnant again. It was unexpected, but Daniel smiled when I told him. Kissed my stomach. Said Lily would make the best big sister. We started picking names. He liked Caleb. I liked Grace. We made space in the house. Cleared out the storage closet. Bought a bassinet on clearance. And then, at 10 weeks, the bleeding started. I remember sitting on the bathroom floor, hands shaking, whispering no, no, no over and over, like prayer could plug the pain. Daniel didn't come to the hospital. He said he had work. I went alone. The nurse didn't speak much. Just pressed her lips together and held my hand when the doctor said, "There's no heartbeat." When I came home, Lily wrapped her tiny arms around me and asked why I looked so sad. I told her the baby went to heaven. She drew me a picture that night. It was of an angel, a baby with wings. It said, "We'll see you again." I kept that drawing for years. Even after Daniel threw the bassinet in the trash without telling me. Even after he said, "You weren't that far along anyway." Even after I stopped talking about it because grief became an inconvenience in our house. I kept moving. Because I didn't have the luxury of falling apart. I worked double shifts at the school that year. Took on tutoring after hours. Cooked, cleaned, showed up at every PTA meeting. Even the ones no one else attended. I missed birthdays. Holidays. Sometimes even dinners. Just to make sure Lily had piano lessons, braces, college prep courses. Daniel said I was too invested in her. That I hovered. But I wasn't trying to control her. I was just trying to keep her safe. Trying to hold on to the only light I had left in a world where mine kept flickering. And now, that same light had scorched me. The daughter I raised, the life I built, the love I gave. All of it, weaponized. And yet, even as I lay on a stained mattress in that dim motel room, reliving every moment, asking myself where I went wrong, a part of me still missed her, still loved her. Because that's the hardest part of betrayal. You don't stop loving them. You just learn to love what's no longer there. Some memories never fade. If you believe some wounds run deeper than time, share this video with someone who understands. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to forgive someone who didn't deserve it? I held on to those flashbacks, not to torture myself, but to remember who I was before the world turned cold. Because I was more than what they did to me. I was a mother, a wife, a woman who had survived losses no one else had seen. And now I was something else entirely. I was awake. And I wasn't done. I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who starts over at 50. But there I was. Divorced. Disgraced. Discarded. The house I spent years turning into a home? The dining table I sanded by hand? Even the curtains I sewed during that long rainy summer? Gone. I walked away with a suitcase, a folded photo of Lily as a toddler, and a name people no longer said with warmth. There's no ceremony for a life unraveling, just silence. I moved into a one-bedroom apartment on the edge of town. Mold in the bathroom. Radiator that groaned louder than I did on cold mornings. The walls were so thin, I could hear the neighbor coughing at night. But it was mine. I got a job at a 24-hour diner 2 blocks away. Graveyard shift. My body ached in ways I'd never felt before. My pride stung every time a former student walked in and blinked twice, trying to hide the surprise on their face. Take their order. Pretend I hadn't once taught them how to multiply fractions and believe in themselves. But every night when I took off my apron and climbed into that creaky bed, the loneliness clawed at me. Not for Daniel, not even for Lily, but for the woman I used to be. And then one Thursday, after a particularly rough shift, I saw a flyer on the bulletin board at the library. Women Rebuilding. Weekly support group. Thursdays at 6 p.m. I almost walked past it. But something stopped me. The following week, I sat in a circle of folding chairs in a room that smelled like old coffee and lavender cleaning spray. There were women of all ages. Some wore rings. Some wore bruises. Some wore hollow eyes that mirrored mine. The first session I just listened. By the third I spoke. I told them what happened, not everything, not yet, but enough. I said I'd been betrayed. By a man. By a daughter. By a story I thought would never end. No one gasped. No one called me crazy. They nodded. One woman touched my hand and said, "That's what they do, honey. They groom you until you forget who you were before them." Another handed me a book. The Gaslight Effect. That night I read until dawn. I learned words I wish I'd known years earlier. Narcissistic grooming. Emotional incest. Enmeshment. Covert abuse. Terms that didn't just live in textbooks, they lived in my marriage. In my motherhood. In my scars. What Daniel did to me wasn't just betrayal, it was erasure. And what Lily did, that was manipulation disguised as love. A daughter-turned mirror of the man who molded her. But for the first time I didn't feel shame. I felt seen. Little by little I found pieces of myself. I cut my hair short, wild, unapologetic. I bought red lipstick the shade Daniel once said was too much. I took a pottery class. The instructor told me my hands were steady, like I'd been shaping things my whole life. And maybe I had. Not clay, but people. A husband. A daughter. A home. And now, it was me I was shaping. I laughed again. A real laugh. The kind that rises from somewhere deep, unexpected. The kind I hadn't heard in years. And then one afternoon, after months of silence, my phone rang. It was Lily. I stared at the name on the screen for a long time before answering. Her voice was bright. Too bright. "I wanted you to hear it from me," she said. "Daniel and I, we're getting married." There it was. Not a question. Not an apology. A statement. A punishment. I said nothing. She filled the silence, like she always had. "I want you to come," she said. "I want you to walk me down the aisle." My breath caught. "You're all I have left," she added softly. "Don't make this about the past." And in that moment, I realized something that stung more than anything else. She believed what she was saying. She didn't see the lines she'd crossed. Didn't feel the blood on her hands. Didn't think she owed me more than a role in her twisted performance. And I wasn't her mother anymore. I was just another guest. A prop in her story. But I didn't cry. Not this time. Because I had learned something in that support group. Something that stayed with me. Forgiveness isn't always an invitation back into your life. Sometimes it's just the closing of a door, from the inside. I said yes. When Lily called and asked me to walk her down the aisle, to the man who used to be my husband, I said yes. Just yes. She called it healing. Said it would show everyone we've moved on. Said, "It'll mean the world to me, Mom. Please. For old time's sake." What she really meant was public image. By then, the whispers had reached beyond our small town. Daniel was up for a new position at a firm known for its pristine reputation. Lily, ever the social climber, wanted the ceremony perfect, flawless. She needed her mother present to complete the picture. Her life, rebuilt from my ruins, needed my blessing. And so I gave it. Or at least, I pretended to. I wore the same soft smile I used to wear at parent-teacher conferences. The kind that made people feel safe even when I was holding back a scream. But this time, behind the smile was strategy. Because the one thing Lily and Daniel never counted on was me watching. Me learning. Me waiting. They saw my silence as surrender. But in truth it was war paint. The first strike was simple. The florist, the one Lily had bragged about, the one she booked under my name as a gift, got a polite cancellation notice from mother of the bride. They called Lily in a panic. She blamed a mix-up. Said she'd rebook. But the date was peak season. Nothing available. She had to settle for a second-tier vendor from 2 towns over. Cheap roses instead of imported orchids. Strike 2. The guest list. I offered to handle the invitations. After all, it's tradition, I told her sweetly. And she was too distracted to notice that the RSVP cards went out with the wrong date. A week early. Only a few were affected, enough to start confusion among her colleagues, the ones she was desperate to impress. Some showed up at the venue days before. Others called frantically asking why the event was moved. Whispers began again. Not about me this time, but about her. Then came the email. A quiet message to the officiant. No threats. No theatrics. Just one line. Due to deeply troubling moral concerns involving the bride and groom, I can no longer stand behind this union. I ask you to reconsider your participation. Discretion appreciated. Attached? A copy of the private investigator's photo. Daniel. Lily. The kiss. I never signed it. I didn't need to. The image spoke louder than any name ever could. And the officiant? He canceled, 2 days before the ceremony. Lily panicked. Called me in tears. I said, "That's awful, sweetheart. But everything happens for a reason, right?" She sniffled and asked if I'd help find a replacement. I said I'd try. I didn't. But the part I'm least proud of? The letter to Daniel's firm. Typed. Anonymous. Delivered by hand. It said, "Before you promote Mr. Harper, you should be aware of the public scandal he's involved in, a sexual relationship with his ex-stepdaughter, beginning during her teenage years. There are witnesses. There are photos. And there will be questions. Sincerely, a concerned citizen." I didn't need to follow up. 2 days later, he was suspended pending an ethics review. 1 week later, the promotion fell through. 2 months after that, the firm issued a quiet restructuring, and Daniel was let go with no public comment. He never saw it coming. Neither did she. Because all this time, they'd been too busy spinning their fantasy to notice the cracks forming beneath them. Now this is where things change. If you're still watching, you're one of us. The ones who know that quiet women carry the loudest storms. Hit like, share this with someone who loves a good twist, and don't forget to subscribe for more real stories. And still, I kept smiling. I showed up for the rehearsal dinner. Sat beside Lily, toasted her new beginning. Wore the dress she picked for me. Helped zip her gown. Laughed when she joked about her future. But in my purse? Tucked beneath a tissue and a tube of lipstick was the final piece. A sealed envelope. Addressed to Lily Harper. Inside, a copy of the birth certificate with her real father's name. Not Daniel. Another man. A man she never met. A man I never told her about because I was young, scared, and desperate to give her stability. But now I would let her wonder. Was Daniel really her one true love? Or was he just another liar who preyed on what wasn't his? She opened it the morning of the wedding. I saw her hands tremble as she read. Saw her eyes dart across the room, searching for answers. Saw her lips part. No words, no breath, just confusion. And then she turned to me. I smiled. Tilted my head. "Time to walk, sweetheart," I whispered. And so we did. Hand in hand. Right down the aisle. The sky was perfect that morning. Clear. Quiet. The kind of blue you only get once in a while, like a peace offering from the universe. The garden was dressed in white satin and soft gold accents. A path of delicate rose petals lined the aisle. The string quartet played a gentle instrumental of Can't Help Falling in Love. Everything looked like it belonged in a magazine, except for the history pulsing beneath the surface. Guests in silk and tuxedos mingled under tents, sipping champagne. Laughter echoed under the arbor. Lily was radiant, hair pinned with pearls, veil flowing like a river of frost behind her. Her dress shimmered in the light. She kept checking her phone. Daniel was late. Very late. But still she smiled, brushed it off, laughed nervously when her best friend asked, "Is he usually this bad with time?" I said nothing. She didn't know the message I'd left on Daniel's voicemail the night before. Didn't know about the file I sent to his mother. She didn't know I'd told him, calmly, clearly, quietly, that if he stood at that altar, I would destroy what little he had left. And I meant it. When it was time, the wedding planner ushered Lily to the starting point of the aisle. People stood. The music shifted. I stepped forward and took her arm. She was trembling, but still glowing. Nervous like any bride, but still certain. She looked up at me and whispered, "Thank you, Mom, for doing this." I didn't answer, just smiled. And then we walked, step by step, between rows of strangers, some of whom used to be friends. She waved. She beamed. The photographer captured every second. And then, we reached the altar, but it was empty. The space where Daniel was supposed to stand, where they rehearsed the day before, where she envisioned her forever, was vacant. No groom, no smile, no ceremony, just a confused officiant, a silent crowd, a soft wind that caught the edge of her veil and tugged at it like a warning. Lily's smile faded. Her eyes scanned the crowd. Left, right, nothing. She turned to the wedding planner, who shrugged helplessly, checked her phone again. No new messages, no missed calls. The string quartet faltered. One violin trailed off before the others. People began to murmur. A few glanced at each other, whispering. Some guests began to frown, shift, pull out phones. Her best friend mouthed, "What's going on?" And Lily? She stood frozen in front of the altar, alone in a sea of expectation and judgment. Her face turned pale beneath the makeup. And that's when I leaned in, just enough so only she could hear me. "Now you know," I said softly, "how it feels to be left behind." Her eyes widened. Her lips trembled. I stepped back, turned, and walked away. Not rushed, not angry, just free. I didn't look back. Not even when I heard her gasp. Not when the first sob escaped her throat. Not when the guests began to rise from their seats, confused, concerned, awkwardly retreating. Let her feel it. Let her stand in the emptiness she once handed me, wrapped in flowers, music, and lies. Because that aisle? It wasn't a path to her future. It was the last walk I would ever take with her. And this time, she would walk it alone. Time passed. The headlines faded. The town found new things to whisper about. The caterer sued. The florist posted a cautionary story on Instagram. The string quartet uploaded a video titled, "When the Groom Doesn't Show." But me? I didn't chase apologies. I didn't check for updates. I didn't answer Lily's texts. Because some wounds don't need bandages. They need boundaries. I took the money I'd quietly saved from my night shifts, from tutoring, from the refund Daniel forgot to revoke from our joint account, and I bought myself a small white cottage just outside town. It had creaky floorboards, chipped paint on the porch railings, and a garden that hadn't bloomed in years. It was perfect. I filled the house with second-hand furniture and first-time peace, painted the walls the color of lavender tea, hung wind chimes that sang at dawn, lit candles for no reason at all. I didn't decorate for guests. I didn't buy wine for anyone else. This time everything was just for me. Then one Thursday evening I returned to the same library where I'd first seen the flyer. I printed 10 new ones of my own. Reclaimed. A circle for women who survived what they couldn't speak. Weekly meetings. Just room to breathe. The first week only 3 women came. By month 2 we had to switch locations. We weren't just telling stories, we were stitching together strength, one scar at a time. They came with tear-streaked faces, trembling hands, nervous laughter. They left with lifted chins and quiet fire. Some brought poetry. Some brought casseroles. One brought a restraining order she finally filed. And every time a new voice cracked into the open and said, He made me feel crazy. I nodded, because I knew. I no longer needed revenge. I had something better. Peace. I no longer needed an audience. I had something deeper. Purpose. Lily never married. Daniel moved states. They don't speak publicly of what happened. I hear things now and then. She took a job in another town. He lost his license to practice for a while. But I don't keep track. That chapter ended the day I walked away from the altar, into my own beginning. One night as the sun melted into the horizon, I poured myself a glass of sweet tea and sat on the porch swing I'd built from old wood. The cicadas hummed. The breeze danced through the chimes. And for the first time in years I wasn't waiting for anything. Not love. Not apologies. Not closure. 'Cause I had it all. Right here. Right now. I lost a husband. I lost a daughter. But in the silence that followed, I found myself. And she was worth everything I had to leave behind to become. If this story moved you, if it made you angry, cry, or inspired you, leave a comment and tell me your thoughts. And hey, don't just subscribe, join our family. Turn on that bell so you never miss a story that needs to be told.